Today I have come to Hagerty Garage in Redmond, Washington, where they have allowed me graciously to be in their space, up their business, reviewing this motorcycle with you guys. If you have a vehicle near and dear to your heart and you would like it to be parked somewhere that they care for and give you immediate access to your key, Hagerty Garage is gonna be your best option if you live locally. They have more branches than this one here. Go check them out with the link in the description. So in this quest of motorcycle manufacturers finding what gives motorcycles the fastest speed and the highest torque, the obvious, straightforward answer was the engine displacement. But there was a limitation there to this. You see, if you continue to increase the displacement of an engine, you're inevitably making the engine heavier and bigger. And bigger and heavier engines meant bigger and heavier motorcycles, something that not a lot of people were looking for. That dilemma led motorcycle manufacturers to think outside the box. They were like, okay, we can't continuously enlarge the engine for the hopes of more horsepower and more torque. We have to think of something else that gives bikes power without that much added weight. And the first manufacturer to come up with an answer outside the box that kind of solved this dilemma was Honda with their CX500 motorcycle back in the mid-80s, which was a turbocharged motorcycle. Honda released this motorcycle hoping that it would become the top dog of all motorcycles, but soon they realized turbocharging a motorcycle was not the best idea. You see, turbochargers have an inherent problem. The problem is turbo lag, which is the time it takes for the engine to spool up, produce more exhaust fumes. These exhaust fumes have to reach the turbocharger unit, rotate the turbine of the turbocharger, and then this turbine would rotate an impeller that compresses air. The compressed air then is shot back into the engine, artificially increasing the amount of air that's in the pistons, that's in the cylinders, and then this would then create bigger, more powerful explosions, and in return you would get more out of your engine. But this whole spiel takes a couple of seconds to occur. It will take a while before you are hit with a wall of power, which was not really something that motorcycle riders were looking for. In a car, it's fine. You get pushed into your seat, it feels nice, it feels all powerful. But on a motorcycle, this strange behavior of no power, no power, no power, all of a sudden getting hit with a whole bunch of power was not really desired or sought after by riders, as it could be dangerous. So soon after that, other motorcycle manufacturers who had followed suit and had added turbochargers to their engines realized that this inconsistent power delivery mixed with the fact that now you have a turbocharger unit on your motorcycle, adding a bit of weight and a lot of unreliability is really not worth the power you're getting out. So motorcycles for the last 40 years went back to be naturally aspirated. After this whole quote-unquote failed experiment with turbochargers, motorcycle manufacturers just went their way to make bikes more powerful and more fun to ride in other ways. They would make them more nimble, they would make them more maneuverable, they would make them lighter, but Kawasaki remained by that drawing board and kept thinking and thinking and thinking how they can boost a motorcycle without the lag. They were like, okay, hang on. We can put a turbocharger on a motorcycle, but why should we rely on the exhaust fumes that come out of the engine to rotate the propellers and the impellers of the turbocharger unit, which creates that lag? Why don't we just directly connect the turbocharger unit with a pulley, with a belt, physically connected to the engine, so as you rev up and the pistons start moving faster and the camshafts and everything else start rotating faster, directly that rotational difference goes to your turbocharger and your turbocharger speeds up faster, which we just call a supercharger. And Kawasaki finally found the answer to how to boost a motorcycle, give it an exceptional power without any lag whatsoever. The power would be on tap, on demand. Whenever you wanted, you twist the throttle and all the angry horses inside the motorcycle are yours to ride. In 2014, Kawasaki put a supercharger unit in their motorcycle, in the H2 line of motorcycle, that made 300 horsepower on the non-street legal version, the Ninja H2R. Over the years, they have created the street legal version Ninja H2, which is precisely the bike in front of me. And this one is a 2023 model, the brand spanking new H2 that I'm going to be reviewing for you. So today we're going to take the opportunity to go all around this motorcycle, and I'm going to show you everything this motorcycle offers you, OEM, bone stock, wheel to wheel, and everything in between. And then we're going to get on it and go ride a supercharged motorcycle and see how it feels. And then I'm going to quantify my thoughts and give this motorcycle an Emmy score. Let's start with the heart of this motorcycle, the elephant in the room, the supercharged four-cylinder, inline four-cylinder from Kawasaki, mounted on this beautiful sparkly green trellis, hollow tubular trellis frame. This motorcycle OEM stock is claimed to make 229 horsepower. Now, the bike is famed for being undertuned with the ECU that comes from factory. So I've heard that if you ECU flash this motorcycle and put a full exhaust system on it, you can bump this up to almost 300 horsepower. And while we're here, let's start the motorcycle up and see how it sounds with the stock OEM exhaust and muffler on it. Now, the almighty power of this engine is transferred to the chain, to the drive of this motorcycle with a 6-speed dog ring transmission system. What is a dog ring transmission? In regular transmissions, you have multiple gears, often 6 gears, that are rotating at different speeds because of the difference in the radii of these discs. The bigger the radius, the slower the surface of the gear rotates, but the more powerful it is. So the torque is higher on that gear and the speed is slower, which is the case, for example, for the first, second, and third gear. As you move up the gears get smaller, so they rotate faster, but at a less powerful rotational force or torque. That's the case with the 4th, 5th, and 6th gear. But how is the transition between these gears is done determines whether you have kind of a synchro mesh style transmission or a dog ring transmission. In a synchro mesh transmission, between the 2 gears, you might have more gears that are of intermediate radii, which means there are smaller than the previous gear you're going in, but still bigger than the gear you're going to. So they are rotating at different speeds that are between the speed of the 2 gears you're trying to go to. So the transition of your gear is kind of done more smoothly. The downside of this system, of synchro mesh system, is that it takes longer to go to a different gear because you have to go over more gears that are intermediary between the 2 gears. In a dog ring transmission, however, that's not the case because you jump from one solid gear to another solid gear without any gears in between. The difference is these 2 gears that you're going from, let's say, gear number 3 to 4, these gears have teeth built on them, very durable, thick teeth that look like supposedly dog teeth. And so when you go from one gear to another, these massive teeth are stuck together and they force you to go from one gear to another without just blowing up the transmission because these teeth are strongly made. So what are you gaining here? With a dog ring transmission, you go from one gear to another gear faster due to the lack of those intermediary gears. The downside is it's just a less smooth shifting process. So bike is a little jumpier when you switch gears, but the upside is you go through gears at a much faster rate, which is essentially what matters the most most in a performance supercharged motorcycle like this one. The shift pedal itself has both quick shifters up and down as well as auto blippers, all built into an OEM that's expected at the price point of $32,000 from factory. On cheaper Kawasaki models, they either have to be programmed into it by a dyno shop, or you just don't get the option to ever add a quick shifter unless you just exchange this whole OEM setup for an aftermarket electronic system. Now let's move on to the front wheel. Everything is pretty much standard here for the Kawasaki high-end motorcycles. You are making the use of Brembo calipers, two of them, the two Stylema monoblock 4-piston calipers mounted on, of course, 320mm Brembo rotors. And the wheel, the aluminum, forged aluminum wheel, the Penta Star here, the 5-point star, is also manufactured by Brembo itself. The forks are upside down, fully adjustable KYB forks. They are not electronically adjusted. I don't know why manufacturers are going towards non-electronically adjusted forks. Maybe it's some sort of customer feedback. Maybe they don't want a computer to decide for them. But even at this price point of 31,500 MSRP of this motorcycle, you still don't get electronically adjusted front forks. The adjustments are made, as you can see here at the top, very beautifully designed, but manual nonetheless. I kept looking at this sticker, trying to figure out what is CKIBS backwards C. After a couple minutes of thinking about this, I realized, these are perhaps just two parentheses around the word KIBS, which is Kawasaki's Intelligent Anti-Lock Brake System, which, as you can notice, the A is missing. So it should be KIABS, but I think KIABS is not really easily rolling off your tongue, so they just entirely got rid of the A. So it's Kawasaki's Intelligent Brake System, even though in the manual has the anti-lock word in there. But anyways, what is this? And how does it differ from the regular ABS? Well, as you can see on the other side of this wheel, we have the motion sensor for the wheel, which also the rear wheel has that because the rear wheel is also equipped with ABS. The front wheel is equipped, as you can see, parentheses, KIBS, and KIBS is just this ABS system on steroids. KIBS here monitors the wheel movement, also the amount of hydraulic pressure in the line, so it knows how much brake you're applying. It also knows the angle of the bike. Are you tilted? Are you straight? Are you actually almost stopped? Are you still moving? What is the G-force acting on your bike? It takes all of that into consideration, and then it decides how much ABS should be used. Should you even use ABS right now or not? So it disables, enables, increases or decreases the rate at which your ABS is applied to the front wheel, which is a much more elaborate system than just the ABS, which again the rear wheel has, and we're going to take a look at that in a moment. And oh boy, Kawasaki disappoints again with this muffler design. You have a mailbox for an exhaust. This massive hunk of metal that's blocking your view to what should be one of this bike's prettiest angles, the single-sided swing arm with the same 5-point star design as the front wheel. Mounted on this wheel, the Penta Star wheel, you see Bridgestone's Batlax tire, 200 tire. So it's bigger than the ZX-10R and the Ninja ZH2 version, so the naked version of this bike. This wheel is bigger than all other Kawasaki wheels offered in their line of products, which makes sense. You're putting down 250 horsepower. When you modify this bike, 250, 260 rear wheel horsepower, so you need a really big boy back here to be able to keep you on the road without spinning out of control. The brake caliper here, I'm glad to see it's Brembo. Kawasaki has been seen to kind of go for Nissin rear brake pads, brake calipers when they don't have to. This is an expensive bike, so of course they've gone with Brembo front and Brembo in the back. It's a 2-piston floating caliper back here, same Stylema brake caliper at the front as the one at the front. And this one is mounted at the very bottom of the disc, which is interesting. It's at the very bottom floating here, which makes bleeding the brake kind of difficult because, as you know, the brake system, the brake caliper where the air has to come out for a bleeding process should be the highest point of the system, and now it's the lowest point. So I assume every time you need to bleed this brake, you have to unscrew it, take it entirely apart, bring it back up here so that it's the highest point of the system, higher than the reservoir over here, and that's the only way you can get air bubbles out of it. One other thing that I just noticed is that this motorcycle has a car-like wheel. What I mean by that is on most other single-sided swing arms, if not all of them, you have a single center nut where you have to unscrew to take the wheel off. This one, you have 5 lug nuts, like a car. So you have to unscrew these to be able to take the wheel off, which is interesting, never seen before. While we're back here, let's discuss the rear suspension, which is Öhlins Unitrack line of suspensions, gas reservoir suspensions, and they have kindly placed this hand adjustment spring up here for the spring preload, and other adjustments are made over here. Again, you don't need any tools to manually adjust. It's not electronically adjusted, it's manually adjusted, but the least they could do, and they did, was to make it so that on the fly, with just your fingers, you can adjust everything you need to adjust on this rear suspension. Few bikes have had the honor of being portrayed as super cool motorcycles in movies, including this one, the Ninja H2, that was in the recent Top Gun Maverick movie. This was Tom Cruise's bike that he rides around the base, and that speaks to the specialty and rarity of this motorcycle. It's cool looking and it's fast, but not really pretty. Starting from the front, you have the Cyclops look, the single front headlight, which I really like, but not a lot of people like that. The problem with older bikes that had 2 headlights were that one of them was the low beam and the other one was the high beam. And so when you would ride down the street without your high beam on, like a normal person, it appeared as though one of your headlights is out and you're just too cheap or poor to change the bulb. Surrounded by the front headlight, you have 2 openings. One of them is a dummy opening because the design of this motorcycle is replicated from the bigger brother of this bike, the Ninja H2R, which does have 2 air scoops that suck air into the supercharger unit and the engine. This motorcycle only needs 1, and so the other one's been left blank. This gives Kawasaki its most signature look, the front headlight with the 2 air scoops on both sides. Another point to mention here with this motorcycle are the mirrors. The mirrors have a spoiler built into them, which is the stem of the mirrors, and you have the turn signals also mounted on the mirrors, overall making the mirrors a little more expensive than other Kawasaki models or Honda or other brands that don't have all that going on with the mirrors, and they have the stalks sticking out of the motorcycle. I don't really like the stalks that the turn signals are on some other motorcycles. I'd rather have them on the mirrors at the expense of making each piece a $200–300 mirror in case you drop the bike or crash it. It would be more expensive to fix, but that looks better overall than if you were to put the turn signals on stocks. I always thought Kawasaki Ninja H2 has 2 seats for a passenger and a driver. That's not the case. You don't even get the option to have anyone sit here. This is a single rider motorcycle. You don't even have the option to add a seat. Kawasaki does not offer one, and I have not come across any website that sells aftermarket second seats. If your girlfriend, your wife, or your partner, whoever wants to sit back here, they are not going to be able to. And if even they were able to do that, you would not have foot pegs for them to put their feet on. So essentially, this is a single rider motorcycle, which begs the question, how did Tom Cruise's girlfriend in the Top Gun Maverick movie sit on this motorcycle? Because they were riding around, both of them on this bike, but this bike clearly can't hold 2 people. I assume both of them sat next to each other, like super compact on the same seat. Where did she put her feet on? I don't see any foot pegs added for a passenger. Maybe that was a prop motorcycle, something designed for that movie. I always thought this is a huge rear end very bulky for a motorcycle. And it wasn't until I met this bike in person, I saw it in person, that I saw, in fact, it's a hole through. It's like a flying buttresses situation going on here, where you have two holes here and spoilers built into them, and they allow the air to go through it and create some sort of downforce spoiler effect here. And Kawasaki yet again strikes with this tail section, and the turn signals, they're as big as my head. I mean, I can just fit my entire arm here, and it's literally as long as my elbow to the tip of my fingers. How big this tail section is looks really ridiculous, combined with that exhaust pipe that's there, the muffler. Those are the very first two things that I'm gonna get rid of. Another note about this motorcycle is the paint on it. Literally, it's a mirror. You have the plastic tank, the plastic body works, and you have a silver lining on it that makes this bike look like a moving disco ball. And I believe for the model 2018 and up, they introduced the self-healing paint into this motorcycle, which essentially means the coating on the paint is very springy. So if you scratch it, it's as though you're pushing the molecules to the side, and if you leave it in a heated environment like right under the sun, these molecules that are pushed away spring back and form the layer they had before, which is a Kawasaki patented paint compound on this motorcycle. As for the electronics on this bike, you have all the bells and whistles that come with a modern bike. You have the Kibs up front, ABS in the back, and you have the quick shifter up and down with auto blipper built into this. You have the engine brake adjustment. It has the launch control mode. It has traction controls. It has rain mode. It has everything you really need. What it doesn't have is a cruise control. I saw this option available on the ZH2, the naked streetfighter version of this motorcycle. I don't see that on the H2 itself. Again, this bike being more of a race bike oriented bike, you probably wouldn't need cruise control available on this bike. On this motorcycle, you also get the TFT screen. It is connectable to your phone via the Rideology app that Kawasaki introduced a couple years ago. With this app, you can kind of see how much gas you've left, where you last parked your motorcycle if you in case lose it, and how many miles are on the bike, what was your recent trip gas mileage, and so on and so forth. You can essentially replicate the screen, the TFT screen, onto your phone and see it from afar anywhere you have data or Wi-Fi. Also with the TFT screen, you can pick and choose what kind of background you want to see. Do you want it just simple white or simple black background, or you want some graphics added to it? The cool thing is that this motorcycle comes from factory. Being a supercharged motorcycle, you have a boost gauge built into the TFT screen. You can adjust the information on the screen to show you throttle, brake, tilt, G-force, all of that are shown to you on the screen like any other expensive modern bike would. In addition to those electronics that I mentioned, you also have an electronically adjusted Öhlins steering wheel stabilizer, well, steering bar stabilizer here. It electronically calculates when it needs to kick in and with what stiffness it needs to aid you in eliminating a potential tank slapper situation. Now, what are the versions available on this bike? So you have 3 H2s to pick from when it comes to the crotch rocket version of it. You do have a Tourer version, the SX SE versions. You also have the Street Fighter version of this motorcycle, which is the ZH2 line of motorcycles. But when it comes to super sport bike, this particular motorcycle, you have 3 options to pick from. You have the H2 base model, which is this one. You have the H2 Carbon, which comes in supposedly more limited numbers, and the only difference is you're getting for about $4,000 increase in price. In fact, $3,500 to be precise. This front end of the motorcycle is made out of carbon fiber instead of this hand-painted silver self-healing paint that you have. You just have a carbon fiber cowling up front, and you also get a serial number on this boost plate here. It tells you how many what number your bike is out of how many that's produced. Those are the few differences you get with the H2 Carbon. And then you can move up to a twice as expensive motorcycle, the H2R, which is not street legal. And busting a myth here, it is not in fact just a non-street legal of this motorcycle. There are more differences than just headlight, tail light, mirrors, and turn signals between the H2R and the H2 and H2 carbon. On H2 and H2 carbon, your camshaft and some other components of the engine are also designed a little weaker than the H2R that's designed for maximum power and track performance, in addition to other things that this bike has that the H2R doesn't, such as mirrors, turn signals, headlights, tail lights, license plate mount, and a bulkier exhaust system. Those are the differences between the street legal and the non-street legal version of the Ninja H2. One other design attribute here is that the H2 line of motorcycles is the only Kawasaki brand, is the only Kawasaki line of products that has the Kawasaki Heavy Industries logo, the conglomerate logo on it, instead of just writing Kawasaki, because this motorcycle in particular is not just the product of ideas and inventions of the Kawasaki motorcycle branch. Lots of components on this bike came from other conglomerate branches of Kawasaki Heavy Industry, such as the most famous one being the impeller inside the supercharger that came from the aeronautics section of Kawasaki that built turbofan and jet engines for airplanes. That's where the impeller came that spins at 130, 140,000 rotations per minute. So that's why the logo up front is the Kawasaki Heavy Industries logos and not just the Kawasaki motorcycles. And with that, let's get on this motorcycle, go out there, ride it, and see how the supercharger feels. All right, so this is a cold start, which means the bike is idling at a higher RPM, and the computer knows when to lower your RPM down to the minimum idle speed. As far as the electronics, you can say the quick shifter is on, Kawasaki quick shifter, or KQS as you see, and traction control is on 3, Kawasaki traction control KTRC is on level 3. Oh, I am nervous. So this bike stock has 230 horsepower claimed by Kawasaki. So we'll see how that feels. So that's the quick shifter up. So that's the auto blipper that you hear. The one, the momentarily rev up before it downshifts. It rev matches for you automatically. That's the auto blipper. Again, you can hear it. Let me go to the 3rd gear. And when I downshift, you can hear a very brief up rev before it goes down to gear number 2, and that's the auto blipper. Okay, take a listen. That's the function of auto blipper. Rev matches for you. You see that green hue around where the rider is in the center of the bike? That's where the G-force currently is. If you brake, that green hue moves up. If you accelerate, moves down. If you lean, it goes left and right, showing you where exactly the CG of the bike is at that very moment. Scrolling through these menus, BST stands for boost, and you can actually see boost and throttle gauges here. It's very interesting to see an OEM stock motorcycle with a boost gauge built into the screen. That again is a very special thing. Right now we're at 101% boost. 100% means boost is equal to naturally aspirated motorcycles. The more percentage than 100 means that's the excess amount of air that's being forcefully conducted into the engine. So if you're at 200% boost, that means there's twice as much air now entering each cylinder as it would have if it was a naturally aspirated engine. Wow. This bike is kind of fast. The only downside I'm so far noticing is this motorcycle does not appear to have any fuel gauge. It just has a fuel light, which stresses me out because I don't really want to be not prepared for a ride. If I sit on it and I ride I want to know how much gas I exactly have left so I can plan ahead. I don't want to be left surprised when all of a sudden the light kicks on. My only other complaint about this bike is that there is a lot of real estate up here. These massive side fairings and all that, it kind of makes the bike look like a cruiser, like a tourer, than a super sport, hyper sport bike. That actually is one of my complaints about the overall design of this motorcycle, is that it's just too bulky, and it, combined with the fact that it's 525 pounds, it's probably the heaviest super sport bike out there. Well, again, they don't call it super sport, they call it hyper sport, but still. So, my final thoughts on this motorcycle: I love it. It's super fast, and it is not as unmaneuverable as people make it sound. It is definitely a motorcycle that can maneuver easily for you. I mean, it goes into corners. It's a motorcycle after all. I think it is a complaint of a lot of people who can't have this motorcycle, is that they say, oh, well, it's so hard to turn. It's just only good for two things: show off and dragging, drag racing. There is literally no other purpose to this bike. No, I don't agree. It is still a very maneuverable bike. It's still extremely capable. Combined with its super high speed and acceleration, it really gives you an experience you've never had on any other bike. And now on to the Emmy Score for the 2023 Kawasaki Ninja H2. In the commuter category, the bike's riding position is not as aggressive as some other super sport bikes, but it is by no means a comfy cruiser. Your feet are still positioned to the back and you are leaned over the tank due to low clip-on height. The H2 earns an average 5 out of 10 in ride comfort. The fuel tank is big, holding roughly 4.5 gallons of gas, which is typical of a liter bike. There is no fuel gauge, however. You can only rely on a fuel light, which is not a favorite of mine. Surfing the forums for this bike, it is a famous saying that the H2 needs a gas station attached to it due to its horrendous gas mileage when the turbo is at work. I mean, the supercharger. The H2 gets a 4 out of 10 in the fuel/range features. As far as the commuting specific tech, the H2 has no cruise control, but it is equipped with a very light clutch, helping you avoid finger fatigue. It has kibs and ABS for a safe braking operation, quick shifters to eliminate the need for pulling the already light clutch, and a rain mode to help you with daily commutes in case of a downpour. The bike is equipped with on-the-fly suspension stiffness adjustments, making it easier to navigate bad asphalt conditions. Not that this bike is designed to be day elite anyways, but it has adequate creature comfort tech to keep you safe and comfortable during your ride. This earns the H2 a 5 out of 10. Storage is almost non-existent, which is expected of a hypersport motorcycle. The only compartment that unlocks when you insert the key and turn it is the pillion seat, which has no storage, and if you want to remove the rider seat, you must use tools. Anything larger, bigger than your registration and insurance papers, you have to bring along your backpack, earning the H2 a 3 out of 10 in the storage category. Again, it's a hypersport bike, so you're not expecting a good score here. A good commuter bike should be cost-effective, reliable, and have a strong dealership network. The H2 is an absurdly expensive bike at $31,500 and has some reliability issues with its unique paint bubbling and some problems with bolts coming loose in the supercharger unit. However, being a Kawasaki, it has a strong dealer network and a great warranty that can be extended to 5 years, earning the H2 a 6 out of 10 for a total of 23 out of 50 points for the commuter category. In the performance/dope factor category, the H2's leaned over and tucked in position becomes a great advantage, helping you get in and out of corners more easily and to ride at high speeds without getting bothered by the wind hitting you in the face. There's always been this myth surrounding the H2 that due to its bulkiness, the bike is not a good track bike, but I am willing to bet those who say this have never ridden this bike personally and just repeat what others tell them. The bike feels super ready to dive into corners, and with the aggressive rider's position that it has, it creates a very track-friendly bike. earning it an 8 out of 10. The horsepower torque figures do not need any elaboration. A 230 horsepower monster with a staggering 105 foot-pound of torque easily earned the H2 a 10 out of 10. At 525 pounds, the H2 is a pretty heavy bike. Compared to other hypersports like the Hayabusa and the ZX-14R, this bike is lighter, but compared to supersport bikes, it's on the heavier end. Maybe this is why Kawasaki calls this bike a hypersport and not a supersport, so that it is not compared to other much lighter leader bikes. Since my score considers a 375 pound or lighter bike a 10 out of 10, and every increment of 25 pounds deducts a score, the H2 gets a 4 out of 10 at 525 pounds. Regarding the racetrack-oriented Rider 8's features, the H2 is fully loaded. It has a lap timer, lean angle sensor, G-force meter, a multi-directional IMU, launch control, traction control, quick shifter, up and down, and a flawless auto blipper function, as well as fully adjustable front forks and rear suspension, earning the H2 a 10 out of 10. As for the H2's design choices in marketplace, it is striking, but frankly not that gorgeous like some other Italian rivals. The self-healing paint ensures the bike is always scratch-free and in showroom shine. The single-sided swing arm combined with the beautiful sparkle green trellis frame give the bike a presence like no other bike. Its appearance in movies and posters speaks to the market position of the H2. With the ever-limiting emission regulation, it is not unlikely that this bike could be cancelled for good, as it is already not available in the EU anymore due to the EU emission Euro 5. This earns the H2 a 9 out of 10 for the overall design and marketplace. I will reserve the 10 out of 10 score only for exceptionally rare bikes like the Ducati Superleggera and or the Kawasaki H2R. This gives the H2 a total score of 41 out of 50 in the performance dope factor category. The H2 is a unique motorcycle. It's extremely fast and loaded with technology. And even though it's considered a special bike, it's at the end of the day a Kawasaki, so the dealership network and warranties are amongst the best in the industry. The used market prices prove this bike holds its value very well, and if you're able to afford one, you should definitely secure a unit before Kawasaki announces its demise. After all, not a lot of bikes get to be Captain Mitchell's land fighter jet in the movie Top Gun.